Oh wait, should I? Oh wait, are we? This is Tyler O'Neill, managing editor at the Daily Signal. I'm honored to be joined by Grover Norquist, who's the founder and president of Americans for Tax Reform. How's the convention for you so far, Grover?
Well, it's going well because first you had the platform, and the Republican platform says clearly we're going to make the Trump tax cuts permanent, which were tax rate reductions for everybody, faster depreciation for business investment and to create new jobs, and in addition to that, to take the corporate rate further down, other taxes further down, and to get rid of tips on taxes on tips, so on tipped income.
That's very
So
good.
it is a no tax increase ever. Yes, for lower taxes beyond what we passed already, but first pass what we need, have, and the tips idea, which I think is great. I think there are a lot of small ideas like that that would be very, very helpful.
So Americans are really struggling right now with high inflation, interest rates. It's harder to buy a home. I myself, my family, we have the golden handcuffs of the good interest rate we got before everything hit the fan. How would you describe the current economic state in America, and what's the way out of it?
Well, there has never been a larger difference in the two parties, the two presidential candidates, on tax policy than this election. There have been times when FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, had secret plans to raise taxes and spending, but he didn't write them down. He ran on, we're going to cut spending 25%. That was his campaign in the platform. This time, our friend Mr. Biden puts into the platform he wants to raise taxes on energy again. He wants to take the business tax higher than China's, so America's not competitive with China on anything, just on taxes alone. He wants to take the capital gains tax, which a high capital gains tax discourages investment. He wants to take that to 44.6%, the highest in American history. 100 years of capital gains tax has never been that high. Capital gains taxes, when you cut them, give you the most growth. When you raise them, give you the least. He wants to raise them as higher than Jimmy Carter did when he gave us stagflation. He wants another death tax, one that will catch every dollar of inflationary gain during your lifetime. Before your children get anything, first you tax you on inflation. And of course, there's been 18% inflation, so 18% of everything that you save that would be taxed on the death tax would be paying the inflation penalty tax for dying. So it's really bizarre. And there are many taxes he won't admit to in terms of writing down, like a carbon tax and so on. I've just listed to you the ones that he's written down. Yes, like on a James Bond movie where the evil genius writes down exactly what he's going to do. Okay,
Yeah.
He makes the mistake of letting James Bond see it. Well, Biden wrote down all his tax increases and bragged about it to the world, which is how you knew that there was a problem with his cognitive skills.
Well, I think there might be other indications as well. But so I want to get into, in his first term, Biden has also increased taxes, or had the effect of increasing taxes, although he may or may not claim. I think he does actually claim, though, doesn't he?
He did tax increases. He raised a lot of taxes on business to make us less competitive in the market.
And what have those wrought? How have they
growth
impacted?
from where we would have been, and certainly helped give us inflation. I mean, one of the things that Biden does, it's its traditional Democratic policy, but Biden said, you're not going to pay this. Corporations will. So I'm going to have a corporation tax, a business tax.
Right.
In point of fact, think of a grocery store. You have a corporate income tax on the grocery store. When that goes up $1 million, okay, first of all, 70% of everything that a grocery store or business does is paying wages. So if you need $1 million, 70% of that's going to come in lower wages. Then you also see higher prices to make up the money to consumers. Consumers pay the corporate income tax. workers pay the corporate income tax. And if you do real damage to the company, make it worth less, people's investments for the future, their 401ks, their IRAs, their pensions, those all become reduced. So retirees, consumers, and workers pay the capital gains tax. And the Democrats say it's capital gains too, actually, but it's a corporate income tax, as if somebody named Mr. General Motors was paying the bills and writing the checks. Right. That is a tax on individuals that's hidden, but it's a tax on individuals. And the good news is Americans for Tax Reform, the group that I organize, has done extensive polling, and the good news is Americans know that. They do know that. They know the corporate income tax damages them directly.
Good. Well, so yeah, and what you've just described to me, I would describe as trickle-down taxation.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And
yes.
so a lot of times, conservative economists are slammed as being trickle-down, and this is a bad term. But in terms of growth for the economy, you want it to trickle down. You don't want the taxes to trickle down.
Democrats have given us many examples of this. The income tax was supposed to only hit high-income people, so we were told this doesn't affect you.
Right.
In order to hit 7% tax, which was the highest tax rate on the income tax, you had to make in today's dollars $11 million. Now 7% is less than the lowest paid American pays income taxes. And you don't have to make $11 million to do that. So the income tax trickled down to most Americans paying an income tax. It was sold as a tax on the rich. The tax to pay for the Spanish-American War was a tax on long-distance phone calls in 1898. That average phone cost $4,000. You can imagine only very today's dollars, well-to-do people had phones. But within a matter of a few decades, every American had a phone, and every American was paying that tax. It started as a tax on the rich. It was implemented as a tax on the rich, became a tax on everyone. The alternative minimum tax was designed to hit 115 people. It got up to where it was threatening 30 million before the Republicans cut it back. So they always introduce taxes. This will only hit them, and only a few of them, but over time, it hits us and many of us.
When I think you see a little bit of that with the way inflation has been impacting the everyday American, because I remember when you could get a McChicken for $1.
Yep.
Now I think it's like $4 or something. And when the McChicken is $4 and maybe wages keep up, I mean, I don't think they've kept up enough, but they are increased because employers know they have to pay more because their employers need more to live on. So you get this inflationary bubble where suddenly, Mr. Employee might be making, he used to make 30 grand, right? Now he's making 50 grand. But the cost of living is increased such that when he was making 30 grand, he'd need to make 60 grand today. And so he is wealthier, and suddenly he has more money, and suddenly the same person making the same real income is in a higher tax bracket.
This is a huge problem, and the Democrats like to hide who pays taxes and who will pay taxes. That's why they like to promise pensions to government employees, because the politician promising those pensions to government employees will be out of office or dead by the time those employees learn there was no money saved for your pension. Sorry.
Yeah.
Or taxpayers will be learned, you know what, we forgot to do something, we're going to have to tax you to pay pensions bigger than any you'll ever see to government workers.
When you kick the can down the road enough, the government almost has to declare bankruptcy. Yeah. I mean, we're looking at an insanely large, national debt. And the only saving grace is that most other countries have similarly large national debts. But at some point, chickens come home to roost. And I mean, I think Americans know we're in a fiscally, impossible place. So that's one of the reasons why Biden is saying he wants to raise taxes. But I think, what is the better solution to deal with this massive, in the red situation?
The best way to deal with the debt and the deficit is to not focus on the debt and the deficit because it's confusing.
Yeah.
The Democrats say, we can fix the debt, we'll just raise taxes. But there are only two ways to improve debt and deficit. One is faster economic growth, so that the amount of debt may be right here, but the economy grows faster so that it's a smaller problem.
Yeah.
Debt, we didn't pay down the debt after World War II. We grew away from it. It was 120% of GDP. It came to be 20% of GDP because we grew the economy faster than deficits and debt grew. But if we'd spent our time raising taxes to pay it down, we'd have never had the growth. And so growth, lower tax rates, and less regulatory burden. That gives you growth. The other way to get the debt and the deficit down is spend less, for crying out loud. And the reason why you want to separate out raising taxes is one thing and reducing spending is another is the Democrats always try and trick us into say, the problem's the deficit. Let's promise to cut spending. We won't. But we're willing to
Right.
promise to.
We'll do it in the next administration when you're tying your hands.
And raise taxes.
Right.
The tax increases are real. The spending cuts never are. We need to separate those and say, forget the deficit. Focus on spend less, grow more. Spend less, grow more. The reason why the Democrats don't like that is they have no ideas about spending less and no ideas about growing more. All of their policies damage growth. All of their policies raise spending. Therefore, to pretend that we agree on the deficit, this is the guy with the big ears who ran against Bush and Clinton, Mr.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness.
Peyton.
This is killing me.
Pickle.
Yeah.
He ran as a third-party
Third
candidate.
party. Yeah.
And he said, you know what?
Man.
You guys, the deficit's this big. We can just raise taxes and cut spending. It's easy
Perot.
peasy.
Ross
Perot. And if you talk about deficit reduction, a Republican and Democrat sounds alike. But if you
Right.
say, what are you going to do? They're complete opposites, which is why Perot is confused. He was hearing a discussion about the deficit. Oh, yes, we should do something, and
Right.
not asking the Democrats, what do you do? Well, I want to spend more, which will make things worse, and raise taxes, which will both make things worse. And the Republican wants to spend less and tax less. So we need to recognize we're in complete opposition here. Democrats don't want to do anything to reduce the deficit.
Yeah.
Even the increases in taxes they want will just slow economic growth. They won't give you deficit reduction. And so we need to focus on growing the economy and spending less. And unfortunately, there's no deal to be made with the Democrats. You just have to beat them.
Well, and you're talking about also the other aspect of this is deregulation.
Yes.
And we just had a fantastic ruling from the Supreme Court on Loper Bright striking down Chevron deference.
Yes.
We have, it's funny. We had that, and then we also had them upholding the funding scheme for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which I found rather curious. But where do you see the deregulation move happening?
Oh, it's extremely important, and getting rid of Chevron deference makes it easier to do. We need to tackle the labor law. I mean, there shouldn't be labor unions in the federal government.
Yeah.
There are.
Even FDR thought it was insane to do so.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this was Jimmy Carter put it there. But there is in that law a statement that if the president says any particular agency or department is important to national security and would be damaged or slowed down by the union, you can get rid of the union. We should start by getting rid of the union at the Defense Department. There are 700,000 government employees. That's how many civilian government. That's how many there were at the height of the Cold War. We dramatically reduced the number of soldiers, airmen, naval officers, Marines, but the number of bureaucrats is still at 700,000. You can't reduce that in any rational way unless you end the unionization there, which all the president has to do is sign a piece of paper, and it's gone. Wow. Same thing is true with TSA. That That union gets in the way of protecting us when we get on planes. And the other
Homeland
is the
Security.
IRS, which, if you read their own data, they say, we're the reason the country's still standing. If we weren't out stealing people's money, there'd be no defense. The Canadians would take us over. We are a critical part of national defense. And they're right, because without money, you can't do national defense. But in their own words, they've said they're critical of national defense, which means the fact that the unions won't let you fire incompetent people. The unions have been part of abusing the system. That union needs to go, so it's easier to fire IRS agents that abuse their power.
So Trump had this policy, Schedule F, where he designated certain employees as policymakers and said they should be fireable at will. Would the unions, would Schedule F be feasible? I mean, he implemented it right before he left office, so we didn't get a real sense of how it would be implemented.
That is a very interesting legal question. Strategically, I would not have announced ahead of a campaign that I was going to do it. I'd wait till I won and then do it, because you just gave Biden 4 years to figure out how to build barriers to your doing that. I understand that's what they think they're doing. I have no idea whether they've hit on something that would actually stop Trump from being able to do that. I think we're better off with more people. I think you want a non-political way to hire people, and that's what the test people take, non-political.
Oh, yeah.
You want people to be easily fired in order to have real control by the executive. The president should hire and fire. And that includes when the Democrats are there. And
that's why it's a democratic policy. Like, that lowercase d, of course. But it's like everybody says, oh, Schedule F, Project 2025, they're horrible authoritarian. They're going to give the president control with no checks and balances. And you look at it and it's, oh no, we don't think there should be a deep state. We don't think there should be bureaucrats opposing the democratically elected president's policy agenda. And you're like, okay, where is this authoritarian? Show me. But I don't know what your stance on Project 2025 is.
The only challenge there is I would not have put it in writing before the campaign, before it was over. I don't believe when Heritage first did that, it was released until after Reagan got elected, because the campaign runs a campaign. And outside groups sort of hinting darkly that they're listening to us, contribute to this because it's our advice to the campaign. That should have been unveiled after the election, not before it, because anything written down, the establishment press or the Democrats can say that's the policy they wanted. And so the president, Trump, has come out and said, no, it's all garbage. It's not all garbage. But he doesn't need...
But he's distancing himself
because he doesn't know what pieces
the
people
election
will take out. So in some cases, it may be completely disingenuous, that the idea that they're attacking may be misrepresented and not... and be something Trump likes, but not the way the press plays it. There may be others it's not at all Trump's position. Or there may be, you know what, we want to run on 20 issues. We don't want to run on 40 issues. Don't add 20 issues to my thing. Now, I've got to defend things that some bureaucrat thought up over at a think tank or some university professor thought up, right? Doesn't mean it's a bad idea, but I don't have the bandwidth to have people come and ask you, well, what about this? I don't know. Which is why you've got to say it's not my project, or why he did. So I do think good ideas should be shared after the election. Now, you take ideas to the campaign and say, I think these 5 things would help you get elected, then they decide. But you don't decide for a candidate what issues will help him get elected.
Well, I think the idea with Project 2025, just to play with this a little bit, was to show, to have a blueprint, because we saw during the first Trump administration, he came in with a lot of new ideas, but a lot of what he tried immediately didn't work very well. Like saying he won't appoint political appointees because he wants to save money. And suddenly you still have the Obama holdovers making all the Obama policies and nobody replacing them because he had this plan. And I think, his heart might have been in the right place, but it wasn't the strategic decision. And I think most in the administration would acknowledge that.
And evidently the original policy people, the personnel that had been picked by a former governor from New Jersey, that got blown up, and then they had to go start from scratch. So there was a challenge because they didn't have a series of ideas written down of what they were going to do, and they didn't have the personnel laid out. Or they did have it laid out, but they set aside all that work and started from scratch. And that meant a delay of a year, year and a half or more in many jobs and getting them there. And if you don't even have people there, you have no control at all. And even if you do have people there, they don't necessarily make everybody do what you want.
Yeah.
Because the other people have civil service protection, and they can't be fired for being incompetent or not showing up for work or for not doing their job.
The very idea, I mean, just the fact that that is the case.
Yeah.
I think most Americans don't understand how protected these civil servants are. And it's like, I want civil servants to be, somewhat protected, but this is insane. You can't get fired for not doing your job. Like, if I'm a waiter and I don't show up for work, I get fired.
Yes. And the federal government and most state governments and local governments have a very bad personnel policy. They pay them more than other people. They give them more benefits than average people. Their pensions are way out of line with what average people in America get. And their tenure for their job is almost permanent.
Wow. Yeah. And that's largely because of these public sector.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Grover, is there anything else we didn't touch on? What's most inspiring to you about this convention?
I'm speaking every morning to state delegations. This morning I did Ohio and New Hampshire. And I told the New Hampshire people, yeah, interesting stuff happens in D.C., but very rarely, because it takes 60 votes in the Senate, a majority of the House, and a presidential signature. So you go years and years without much movement. But in the 50 states like New Hampshire, no income tax. Well, no income tax except for a tax on dividends and interest that disappears next year. There'll be a complete no income tax state next year.
Nice.
That when New Hampshire is one of the states that votes for school choice, for education freedom, school vouchers, education savings accounts, it makes it safe for other states. So we now have 10 states that have done school choice for everybody. Nice. And more that have done it for some people. And then Texas is in line, and a number of other states are in line to join that group. Our ideas work. So whether it's concealed carry or open carry or permitless carry for a weapon, or criminal justice reform on how many people do you need in prison for how long a period, that all of those things, you pass them in one state, they work. The world doesn't end. Then other states do it. And then maybe Washington does it. The idea of the right to try, getting people who have terminal diseases to be allowed to use drugs that are not yet determined to be effective. They're safe. They won't kill you faster than what you got, but they're not.
Right.
We don't know if it's effective. Well, I'm dead in 6 months or a year.
Yeah,
I'd like
give
to
me
try.
a chance.
Give me a
yeah,
break.
Exactly.
That passed 44 states, and then Washington. Only then did Washington act, and Trump signed the bill because Congress was willing to pass it. The Democrats can't use that because none of their ideas work. As an example, in Vermont, they passed single payer, where the government would do your health care, like Canada. And then they repealed it because it was a stupid idea and it didn't work. Now,
my favorite was AB 5 in California. How many different cutouts do they now have?
So there are two in the state of Vermont. There are two senators say, well, we want to impose the program that failed in Vermont
on the entire country.
Nationally. They're not selling it to another state. They're smarter than that. Massachusetts, under Dukakis, passed government-run health care. As soon as he lost the election, they repealed it. They were planning to impose it on America, but they know that you can't do it with one state because the damage would be too obvious. So our ideas can be done state by state, and then Washington, their ideas you can only come top down. It's the big advantage Republicans have. Homeschooling also. Many, many states before people said, okay, this is safe.
Yeah.
But it passed in state after state after state.
Well, so which of the states are best improving from the pandemic, and where, do we have any economic models that the rest of the country should be following?
That's a very good question. We certainly saw a difference between the states. Some states shut down completely, some that shut down a little bit, some opened up sooner. The ones that shut down later or not at all, like South Dakota, did better in terms of casualties than the people who did shut things down. So I think we learned that was a mistake, that approach, one size fits all.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Grover, for joining us. And
thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, best of luck in your breakfasts and second breakfasts. With,
yes. Well, these are the states that change the world.
Amen to that. Again, this is Tyler O'Neill with the Daily Signal. Grover Norquist with Americans for Tax Reform. Where can the people find you?
HER.org is our website. I tweet at Grover Norquist.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us.